Welcome to episode 22 of the Motorcar Marketing Podcast. I'm Ashley Myers with motorcarmarketing.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm going to be talking with Scot Hall from Swap a Lease. Scot offers some interesting tips on how you can better use leasing to close more deals and potentially bring in more sales. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help us out by giving us a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so it's very much appreciated. If you have any questions or comments about anything, feel free to send us an email at info@motorcarmarketing.com. I want to improve this podcast, so some honest, constructive feedback is always appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on the website in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.motorcarmarketing.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode 22. We recently put together a free guide for car dealers called the Quick Start Auto Dealer Marketing Guide. You can get it by going to motorcarmarketing.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and the lessons will be emailed to you over the course of the next few days. We've tried to concentrate on the high leverage things you can do with each marketing channel so you can get the maximum results in the shortest amount of time. We'll be adding more lessons to this guide in the future, but to start out, we'll show you how to increase your ROI and sell more cars on Craigslist, how to quickly set up a Google pay-per-click campaign, how to begin generating leads from local search engine optimization, and how to effectively use email marketing to generate leads and correspond with your past customers. Again, this guide is completely free. Just go to motorcarmarketing.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today, I'm talking with Scot Hall from Swap a Lease. Here is the interview. Welcome, Scot, to the Motorcar Marketing Podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me on.
So to start out, I wonder if you can give us a quick overview of your career and how you got into the automotive industry.
Absolutely. I entered the automotive industry back in my college days. I've always been kind of a gearhead and a car nut my entire life. And in order to earn some extra money during my college years, I started working at a dealership, started out washing cars, kind of at the low end of it, and started to realize, boy, there's a lot of potential here for various careers and of course, the potential to make some pretty decent money. As I got out of school, I looked at some various opportunities otherwise and just didn't find those as attractive as what opportunities existed in the car business. And one thing led to another. Kind of got a ground floor start again in the car business and worked my way up the ladder from there.
Okay, so when you started at the ground up, you started actually selling cars and then worked up through the various jobs from that angle.
Absolutely. I actually joined on my original position after leaving college, after graduating from college, was an assistant finance manager, which a lot of that entailed selling on the floor, and that grew into a finance and insurance F&I type position, and that grew into a larger F&I position, and from there eventually grew into my position that I hold currently at swapalease.com.
I see. Perfect. So I actually found you through an article that you wrote about Canadian leases and how they work and how they differ from sort of the logistics of an American car dealer or car lease. And I wonder if you can kind of just give us some of that information, sort of explain the differences. And then the main point of the article was sort of how dealers could potentially benefit if they look at this Canadian model and how they could benefit. And maybe we can get into some of those benefits that the car dealers listening to this might be able to actually implement.
Yeah, well, number one, in Canada, even though it's a much smaller market overall, automotive, leasing is very much more prevalent in Canada. And, of course, there's many advantages for a dealer to push leasing and tout leasing. Most notably, you're going to cycle through consumers on a more quicker basis. In other words, most leases anymore, as most of our listeners will understand, are set up on a 36-month type term or 3-year term, and automotive loans are growing and growing and growing. Many are in the 72-month range at this point. So in theory, if you really push the leasing as an alternative form of financing, that's all leasing really is at the end of the day, is another way to finance a vehicle. You're able to service your customers twice as often in many cases. So number one, pushing the leasing is something a better job is done in most cases in the Canadian market. Number two, and it's more Swap a Lease specific, is on the lease transfer side of the equation. In the United States, lease transfers are handled between the consumers and the leasing company itself. Dealers are essentially out of that equation altogether. In Canada, the manufacturers, or at least the captive finance arms of the manufacturers, have said, look, it's a better way to do this would be to hold this type of transaction at the dealership. And of course, the advantages are several-fold. If I wanted to transfer my lease to you, and of course you wanted to take that lease over, why not go to a place that specializes in essentially everything automotive? A place that's comfortable doing the paperwork, a place that's comfortable to do credit applications and credit approvals and what have you. Of course, they're going to be sending those out from there. But really what it does as a benefit to the dealer is it gets somebody in there that introduces them to their sales staff for the next time they need a car, introduces them to their service center in order for future repairs and maintenance. And, of course, there's going to be somebody leaving that lease transfer that may need a vehicle right then and there.
Mm-hmm. Now, and that's one thing I wasn't clear on when I read the article. So it sounds like it would almost be like a new arm, a new department within a American car dealership that would handle this, because the way, and correct me if I'm wrong, just the logistics of this is if you currently have a car, the lease is running out, and you say, I want to sell it or transfer it, that consumer makes the effort to basically find a new person to take on that car, and then it's just a matter of going to the dealership, not necessarily looking to buy another car, but just looking for someone who can handle the logistics of processing this paperwork and turning the lease over. So the dealership is not necessarily involved in helping that consumer find a buyer for the car. Is that correct?
Correct. The dealership would be involved in what I would classify as the clerical part of the equation. In other words, once the person wanting to exit their lease finds or matches up with a person that wants to take over the remainder of that lease, it would be a location that they could go to more efficiently and not only more efficiently, but properly handle that transaction with people that are accustomed to transactions that are similar.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and I definitely can see how this would be good, because then exactly as you point out, you get the peripheral stuff where you have basically a person who's getting rid of their old car, and hey, by the way, we sell cars over in this nice showroom over here, and you can sign them up, the person taking over the lease, you can sign them up for all the service. Is there some, realistically, can a dealership in the U.S. actually set up this arm of the business and actually get this working?
Well, right now, I don't see any reason that they couldn't. It just isn't the traditional setup at this point. And frankly, I don't think I would actually look at it as more of an ancillary program to the current F&I department. I think that would be the best way to structure it. Those individuals are already accustomed to getting credit approved, and of course, a credit approval is a necessary step in any lease transfer, no different than buying a new vehicle. And there may even be opportunities, depending on the particular lease being transferred, for upsale opportunities for extra items such as extended warranties, protection packages, etc.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. I mean, because this is a standard in Canada, it seems logical that a consumer that is looking to process this type of a transaction would know to go to a car dealership. If a American dealership were to set something like this up, how would they go about relaying that information to consumers so that the consumer knew that this was even a possibility? Hey, let's go to this dealership because they can handle this paperwork.
Well, I think it'd really be twofold. I think it would be something that the dealer would benefit from educating that consumer when they originally leased that vehicle, and then secondarily work in concert with the manufacturers when a individual who leases a vehicle contacts their manufacturer and asks them for potential ways out, be it need-based or want-based. It could also be part of the instructions, if you will, provided by the manufacturer. Hey, go visit your dealer. They can help you complete this transaction once you find somebody to buy that lease from you, take over that lease from you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I just want to go back to one more thing that you said. The leasing rates are higher in Canada than they are here. I'm sure all the dealerships understand that the leasing is a good thing from their side, but I wonder, do you have any tips? How can dealerships potentially get their lease rates up as opposed to, as you said, the more traditional financing? Are there some ways that they can encourage consumers to do this?
Well, I think it's becoming less and less of an issue, but I've been out of the retail end of the automotive business for a little while now. but I do recall different dealerships, or hearing at least anecdotally from different clients, that dealerships that they'd visit didn't even offer them lease payments. So I think the first step would simply be to make sure that the salespeople and sales managers, and of course F&I professionals as well, are very versed in leasing, understand the ins and outs, are able to answer questions, and basically give consumers those different alternatives. Once again, leasing simply a different way to finance a vehicle.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's talk a little bit about Swap Lease, the current company that you're working for. Can you give us kind of the 2-minute elevator pitch for what you guys do, and then we'll kind of dig into how dealers can potentially work with you?
Oh, absolutely. Maybe even make it quicker than that, but really what Swap Lease is very similar to a dating service for car leases. We want to match up people who want to get out of their leases. Again, it could be need-based or want-based, and match those folks up with people who want to take over leases on the short term. Of course, there's many advantages economically for both sides of the equation, and we've had a lot of success at this over the last 14 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that just for a second. What are some of the advantages on the consumer front? If I'm someone who is looking for, a nice car and they go on this, what are some of the advantages to me as a consumer looking to take over someone's lease payments?
Well, we call that the buyer side of the equation, or the person taking over the lease, and there are several advantages. Number one, a lot of folks do like the short-term nature of taking over a lease, keeping in mind the lease is shorter term in nature already, and there's people out there that have a need for a car for only 12 months or 18 months, and renting a car just isn't going to be cost effective for that type of duration. Mm-hmm. Additionally, they're going to be able to take advantage in some cases of people that have put down payments of cash or trade equity, making those payments even more attractive than what they might normally be. Additionally, something else we've seen is the used car market's been strong over the last several years, is people are taking over those leases, essentially treating it as a long-term test drive, and then going ahead and buying out those vehicles if it lives up to their, what they thought it would be.
Yeah. And then let's do the same thing on the seller side. What are some of the advantages for the sellers?
Well, as I'm sure most of the audience would understand, is getting out of a lease midterm is a very difficult thing to do economically, because it can be very expensive and create a significant amount of negative equity. However, people do lease cars. Their needs change. What they need that vehicle for. Their job may change. They may lose their job. They may get downsized. They may even get promoted. Maybe they want to get something even more impressive as a vehicle. And getting out midterm can be very expensive once again. And simply transferring that lease and paying a small transfer fee is a much more beneficial way for that person to get out of lease. Additionally, kind of a little bit further downstream, that person's going to leave that lease with a much better taste in their mouth, be much greater satisfaction, and be much more likely to lease another vehicle of the same make in the future.
Yeah. And is this service nationwide so consumers throughout the country can do it, or are you localized to a region?
No, we are nationwide in the United States, and we do have a footprint in Canada as well.
Okay, perfect. So now let's just talk about how, dealerships and especially maybe even some of the smaller dealerships. I work with a lot of small dealerships in Southern California. So how can these dealerships, potentially maybe use Swap Lease to help facilitate more sales on their end?
Well, I think there's several ways. And kind of jumping back to one of your original questions is, let me give just a little bit more history of Swap Lease. But the gentlemen that own our company are also owners of a large auto group in Cincinnati, Ohio, where our headquarters is based. And the idea for Swap Lease was born in the late 90s, actually on the showroom floor of several of their dealerships. And the idea was born as a result of them having to continually turn away people who wanted to buy or lease another car today, but were stuck midterm in another lease. So their idea was, hey, if we could help people get out of these leases sooner or more frequently and create a marketplace to do so, we'd ultimately be able to sell more new cars. So that is definitely one of the advantages, is to increase that cycle for the consumer, and again, accelerating it even more than a normal lease. Mm-hmm. Additionally, somewhat similar to Auto Trader and Cars.com, Swap Lease has dealer programs available where dealers can advertise their leases to consumers. In other words, lease originations to consumers, and show how competitive they can be on lease payments.
I see. Perfect. Well, Scott, this has been very informative. I really appreciate it. What's the best way for people to keep up with you or potentially contact you if they want to learn more about something that you've said?
Well, really, the best way would be to visit the Swap-A-Lease website, which is simply 3 words run together, swapalease.com. We have all sorts of information there, not only about lease transferring, but leasing in general, and that may be another advantage for consumers or for dealers to push their consumers toward as well. And my email address is simply shall, S-H-A-L-L, @swapalease.com. Be happy to correspond with anybody.
Perfect. Well, Scott, once again, this has been very informative. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
If you're currently looking for a high-quality auto dealer website, check out our sister site, motorcarsites.com. We offer high-quality auto dealer websites at a very affordable price. Dealers can typically save between $50 and $150 per month by using our service. You can upload as many cars as you like at no additional cost. We can automatically export your cars to all the major platforms like Cars.com and AutoTrader, so you don't have to manage your inventory in multiple locations. We can have your new website up and running usually in less than 24 hours. Setup is, of course, free and easy, and there are no long-term contracts. Check out motorcarsites.com to learn more. So that's our show. I hope you got some value out of it, and it can help you grow your business. Thank you for listening.